Go ahead.
Okay, Shauna, thanks. All right, folks, I need a motion to, everyone is here, and all the board members are in attendance. I need a motion to adopt this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Linda?
Second.
Second.
I got 2 seconds. I think that was Stacy and, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, that's carried. Okay. The hearing of the public, there's a messaging mechanism according to Shauna. So if we have any messages at this point, I guess we'll try to deal with them now. Otherwise, we'll pick them up at the end. Do we have any, Shauna?
No, there's nothing there right now.
Okay. All right, moving along. Last I checked, we did not have a personnel consent agenda. I think that's still the case.
Correct.
So moving on to the remainder of the consent agenda, I need a motion.
So moved.
Annie,
Second.
Stace? Okay, any questions? Several things there, including the calendar. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried as well. Okay. There is no president's report. We've got a bunch of things that the superintendent is going to cover, so I'm going to pass things right on to you, Corey.
Yeah, so thanks so much again for being able to be flexible and add this meeting. We thought it was important considering all the updates that are coming out of state ed and out of New York State, that we could give you more up to date information from where we're currently at. So I think from our last meeting, the governor did officially extend school closure through the 29th of April. One of the things that we've been working on continuously over the past 3 weeks is developing a more robust remote learning plan. We've kind of been, as we've communicated, we've been in the mode of a lot of review and allowing students to complete back work. We extended Q3, which will extend to the end of this week, April 17th. Then our plan is to tonight to kind of walk you through our remote learning plan of that was really, it's been a lot of work put in by, several of our staff members. Our teaching staff have been incredible as a part of this process with administration, working together to build this remote learning plan, as we move forward here in these unprecedented times. So I've been through it quite a few times. I think they've really just done a fabulous job. I know Bob's on here, and he's spent the bulk of time with this group, so I was gonna have him talk about the remote learning plan a little bit more tonight, and I'll focus a little bit more on budget after we go through this. So you can kind of see how this has evolved. I did just get word today that all of our kindergarten and first grade students who initially didn't have iPads, they all do now. They've all been delivered within, I think, the last 24 to 48 hours. So all of them have received their iPads now. So we're really pleased with that. I want to thank obviously our transportation department for playing a big role in getting those out to the homes as well. So that was one of the pieces we were missing, as we continue to move forward here, is to be able to get them their devices. So Bob, do you want to talk about a little bit about the remote learning plan and how we're moving forward?
Sure. So we've been working with, as Corey said, we've been working with teachers over the last few weeks to really develop a decent plan or framework to move forward. And in general, it's different based on level. So what you're going to get from a primary level versus an intermediate level or a high school level changes a little bit. But what's interesting as we keep going through this process, they're actually becoming more similar. Because elementary has a unique advantage or the advantage of having a smaller number of kids to focus on. They have 20 to 24 kids that they're trying to connect with every day that they are used to having every day is different than a high school teacher trying to connect with 120. I think what's happening is throughout the whole structure, all the different levels, we're seeing a lot of successes. We're seeing some challenges, of course, in this new environment, and we're working through them. But what you're going to see through this plan is that from an assessment standpoint and how we grade kids is going to become more common or more seamless from kindergarten and little guys all the way up through high school. And that's a good thing. And we'll talk about that later. So Marcy has the plan up on the screen. As everybody knows, the governor did put out an executive order that has closed school through April 29th. We are required to continue education and submit to the state continuing education plans, which we have done through the state ed portal. Like I said, the last meeting, and I've kind of said all along and having conversations with the teachers, we're really good place right now. We're very well positioned as a school district. As Corey had said, every single one of our kids now has an iPad at home that's district owned and can make a connection with. And when it comes to connecting with kids, and this doesn't mean that we've necessarily gotten work from them, but just simply making a connection with kids, we've been very successful. We're down into a handful of kids at each grade level in the elementary school. We're in the mid 90% range as the high school of connecting and at least reaching out and either having some form of communication with kids in our school district. And that's a really good sign for us. Now the challenge moving forward is to get as many kids as possible to commit to our education plan and commit to doing work that is going to be required as we move forward. So in executing this plan, we've talked a little bit about curriculum decisions that we've made, and we'll talk about the essential skills. The thing to keep in mind there is that right now is a time when teachers are going to become pretty razor sharp focused about what skills kids need to learn right now. They are going to get down to, if you're in the elementary grade levels, what are those most important skills if I'm a fourth grader to get to fifth grade, and focusing solely on those. And in the specific coursework at the high school, same thing, really weeding the garden and getting down to what's most essential in the last few weeks. We'll talk about the delivery methods that are going to be used, time expectations, and they're different based on level. Grading being the biggest conversation that we've had, and I think we've come to a pretty good place on that. The assessments we'll use, and then supports we're putting in place. Keep going. So, as I said, with curriculum, as we move into new content, it's really going to be about those essential skills. One of the things that's been required here is creating strong routines and consistent routines when teachers connect with kids. And I think we've gotten that in a pretty decent place in the elementary school, where parents know at this point what time of day they're connecting with their teacher and a kid's connecting with their teacher, and the routine of submitting things. Still working out little kinks here and there, but in general, those routines are pretty good placed. And what's interesting about that, and what you have to keep in mind, is it's different than traditional school, obviously, because they're not there. But now we're forced with a variety of different connection times. So it's not as simple as to say, I'm having class at 10 o'clock in the morning, be there. Some parents, there's quite a few parents who are working. And when they get home, that's the time that they're working with their kids and then making a connection with teachers. So we have teachers that are going all over the map in terms of hours and connecting with kids. They don't always connect with all of their kids at one specific time of the day. Some are connecting with a good chunk of them in the middle of the morning. Some might connect with a few more in the afternoon. And then there's some that even have to wait until 7 o'clock at night to find that one or two kid they can make a connection with. So they're doing all sorts of ways to make the connections with kids and utilize their time. And that's why now more than ever, when it comes to our curriculum, we really want to get down to what's essential and not waste time with things that really might not matter as they move on to grade levels. I think everybody is aware now that Regents exams have been canceled, and that the state has basically said that any student who is enrolled in a Regents level course right now is exempt from having to take the exam this spring, including this summer. So what that basically means is that they are going to get credit for Regents credit for the course so long as they complete the course. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we move forward with the grading piece, because those Regents credits are crucial for graduation. So New York State is basically exempting them from having to take the exam. There's still a lot of unanswered questions about how things are going to work out in terms of certain diplomas, with advanced designation and things like that. But in general, they are exempt and they get credit if they complete the course. Advanced placement courses are going as business as usual. They use the traditional grading system as it's always been, and the AP tests are now online and students can choose to take the test online. Our college courses through TC3, they continue to go on pretty much business as usual. And we're still working out exactly how the grading structure is going to be with the college. They are still looking for a B, C, D model. And we're going to have to turn what we're doing into those letter grades to get kids college credit. Shouldn't be a real problem. We just got to work out the methods there. As far as instruction, a lot of what we're talking to teachers about is the chunking part. You'll see that word chunk in there. That's back to those essential standards, getting down to what really matters the most. The other thing that we're talking about is this is not a time to overwhelm kids. This is not a time to overload kids with work just to keep them busy. It is about creating instructional opportunities or activities that are directly tied to whatever outcome we're looking for on the essential skill side. May take time over the course of a week, but they're not overwhelming in nature. It is not a model at all that's going to look like, well, every day you log in and every day you do a worksheet. It's not like that. We're moving away from that kind of system. As far as instruction goes, we're continuing on with our Google Suite. We use Google Hangouts, Google Meet. Quite a few teachers are using Zoom. Zoom has a lot, as we're using it now, Zoom has a lot of capabilities. We're seeing some really good, strong practices out there with Zoom. So we're seeing classrooms in which teachers are co-teaching with special education teachers or with service providers or academic intervention teachers, where they can actually come into the actual class and they can use breakout rooms and and one teacher can work with one set of kids and one teacher can work with another set of kids. So some really good stuff happening out there that's starting to develop. All of these assignments can all be done on the iPad. We're trying to make sure of that. The biggest thing that we're going to be doing now moving forward is, and the other thing I want to make sure you understand is that most of how we communicate is through Schoology. So the general way to communicate with files and assignments and getting them to students and having them submit back is through Schoology. Third grade at AES is using Shobi. A couple other grades you might be interested in. That's another system that's actually shown some really good success. But Schoology is the general one we've been using for most across the district. Moving forward with elementary instruction, one of the things we want to communicate to parents is that this is a time that parents will want to be in connection with their teacher more than ever. And that we want to be able to provide a message that says that parents and teachers are pretty much, you're on the same team. And feedback is crucial here. So one of the things that I've been hearing from our elementary teachers is that they want feedback from parents. They want to know what's going well, what struggles are happening when it comes to the learning environment at home, and to be able to communicate that. So we're going to be talking to teachers or talking to parents and putting out a message to parents to let them know that it really is important to make a connection with your teachers, your students' teachers. New instruction moving forward. The other thing we want to be able to stress to parents is that the material they're going to be learning moving forward. Can you hear my dogs?
Yes.
Are they going? Can you hear them?
Yeah. Yeah. I can,
Sorry. I apologize for them.
They were trying to blame me for that, just so you know.
Sorry about that. Anyways, new instruction moving forward. We want to make sure that parents understand that the learning coming from April 20th on is going to be crucial for kids to connect with. That this is not a time to say, okay, well, you know, it's not like this really matters. No, it matters a lot. So that if you're a third grader or a fourth grader, what they're going to be going over the next 8 weeks is crucial for them to have for when they enter the next grade. And we're really going to want to be able to drive home that message to parents to help them understand they got to make a connection. They've got to make sure that kids are working with their teachers to hit those specific essential skills. And that requires them to connect and submit the assignments. And like I said, those set routines and systems and times, they should be in place by now. For the most part, they are across most of the grade levels. The high school is going to have a little bit more structure to it than that in a specific way with a schedule put out for office hours. And you'll see that a little later. Time expectations. In general, your primary grades, no more than 2 hours a day. Even in the intermediate grades, we're not trying to overwhelm kids with tons of work. That's not the goal here. The goal is to get down to what matters. Friday will be what we call our goal day. And this is a time where we can, teachers can work together collaboratively on planning and what they're seeing and the challenges they're seeing. And another thing for Friday is to make individual connections with kids, which is happening quite routinely, actually. So when a kid needs extra help, and this can come from the younger grades all the way up, Friday's a great day for that to happen. Keep going. Time expectations. We are also putting out a special schedule that you'll see here. So that way, if a kid wants to connect with the art teacher at the elementary school, or STEAM, or the PE teacher, or music, these are set times built into the day of each day, Monday through Thursday, where those teachers will be available for certain activities. And teachers can work around this particular schedule in order for that to happen. Still a work in progress. Sixth grade, you'll see here, this is their office hours. The idea behind office hours is really, it's not about kids having to be there 100%. It's about when they need to make a connection with the teachers based on what's been given to them in terms of assignments. So you're not going to have every kid on every single time. Although what we are finding is the face-to-face interactions are probably the most valuable pieces in terms of getting kids to master the learning. So our hope is to keep increasing those numbers as we keep going. Time expectations for 7 through 12. you'll look at this particular schedule, and these are the office hours built in for each subject area and each course. So this way, kids know that these are the times set for their particular subject area, so there's no overlap. So if I'm in, my social studies teacher isn't trying to meet with me at the same time as my ELA teacher. So that way, if I need extra help, I can hit these times. The important thing I want to stress here is this is not a daily schedule that kids must go on. It's not. They are office hours. They are an opportunity for help or to connect and hear from your teacher about what the learning that you've been given for the week. So if I've been given this particular assignment for the week and I'm confused, or if I want to hear the teacher talk about that assignment, because I'm more of an auditory learner, this would be a time where I can get on. I don't have to as a student, but it's there and it's available to them.
So Bob, I think one of the things maybe to clarify in here too, that we've had some feedback and questions about is the model more in 712 will be more asynchronous. And that really means that teachers will be developing video-based lessons that they can submit to Schoology, where kids can work at their own pace. And just to clarify, those office hours are there for extra support if there's things that they don't understand in that asynchronous model of watching the instruction in advance to when these times are available. So it's a different approach. It's a fairly common approach for remote learning at the upper grades. And that's one thing we just want to keep stressing, is that it's still a flexible schedule, but these are times we wanted to make sure that there were enough staff available at separate times, so that if a kid wanted to reach out to every one of their teachers, then they could do that.
So probably the more difficult challenge moving forward was what we were going to do with the third marking period. And this is strictly 7 through 12 that I'm talking about. Like Corey said in the beginning, we're giving ample time for kids to make up work or increase grades from the third marking period by, making up work that they might have done poorly on in the past. And we're seeing kids generally take advantage of that and do the work. We're seeing connection that way. But in the fourth marking period, a lot of the debate and a lot of the conversation is around equity and motivation. So think about those two things. All right. One, we want to be fair and equitable to all kids. If we are going to believe as a school district that all means all, then we have to practice it in the way we're doing things. We also want to motivate kids to make a connection and do the work, because they don't come in the doors every day and we can't quite control it. So what's going to motivate kids to do the work? And we were around and round and round on this in a lot of different ways, a lot of different ideas. What we basically came down to is this framework. We're going to go with a pass or incomplete model. And what that basically means is that if you put in the effort and the work in a general sense, you're going to pass. If you don't, you're incomplete, and then you're coming back in the summer in some capacity to make it up. Now, what that summer will look like is we don't know yet, because we don't know how this is all going to shake out. But you have that second opportunity then, and if you don't do it then, well, then you're repeating the course. And that's generally, when you read the guidelines by New York State, that's generally the guidelines they're providing. When you look at the way they've mapped out the regions, they're basically saying, look, if you complete the coursework for regents, you're going to get the credit. You don't have to take the exam. If you don't, you got to come back in the summer, and you still don't have to take the exam if you complete the coursework. If you don't do it then, you're repeating the course. And that's a pretty fair model. It's a pretty open model to get this done. The second piece was, well, how are we going to grade everything? Because the problem with just a straight up pass is, what does it actually mean in terms of a grade point average? And what does that mean for all of the different facets that grade point average and transcripts have? So when you go with traditional grading, it ends up creating a very inequitable issue in terms of how that's all going to shake out. So, you know, you got connection issues in terms of kids and what they can actually get done in terms of their internet connection, which is not huge, but we do have some of that. There also is limited opportunity to gain the support you might need as a student. The learning environment might not be that great for you. You might really need to be in school to get that extra help. So we don't want to penalize kids in this environment and in this learning environment that we have. We want to, at least as possible, to do something like that.
I think when we develop this model, the number one thing that we're focused on is we don't want to harm kids in any way. So
Right.
by building a model where the focus is really on learning, that we're asking them to be engaged, we're asking them to participate, and we're asking them to work their way to a level of proficiency for standards and skills to be able to have the foundational pieces that they need for the remainder of this school year. So when we looked at it and considered it as one quarter really that we're dealing with right now, obviously there's several components there, but ultimately it was really about putting together a framework where we weren't out to harm any kids. We want everybody to walk away from this with, hey, if you put the work in and you participated and you gave great effort and you were had feedback with your teacher back and forth and your learning grew along the way, then by all means you're going to receive 100 in credit for that, for doing that work in this type of model.
And the important thing there is, and we went in all sorts of circles on this, back and forth. And the high school has, for the last couple of years, been studying and working towards standards-based grading, which is what you see at the elementary grades, a 1 through 4 model, right? 1 being a certain level, 2, 3, or a 4 being the highest. I exceed proficiency. And there has been some teachers who have moved more towards that model. The model with the 1 through 4 model and standards-based grading provides better feedback to kids, because you got to ask yourself the question, what does an 80 really mean? You know, your kid comes home on a report card and it says it's an 80. What does it really tell you? It doesn't tell you much. You don't get a lot of feedback from this number grade that shows up on your report card. And this is a time that feedback is crucial. And we want to create a system that is structured around that feedback, not around a number. The number doesn't tell you much. So we simply are taking the number pretty much out of play if you really think about it. Do the work, show the effort, participate, do as best you can to master the skills. We'll be providing feedback to you over and over again as teachers, but you do it, you're going to get 100. And it takes that out of the play. There's no number there to worry about. The other thing that I want to make sure is understood out of all this is that, and I'll show my cards here as an educator and what I think personally, education is not a competition. It just isn't. It is about learning. It is not about who's better than who. And this is not a time to get down into who's better than who. It is about simply focusing on what is important to learn and try to master that learning. And with the environment we're dealing with, because it's new to everybody, we're trying to make it as fair as possible and making it motivating as possible. Now, keeping in mind, the first 3 marking periods are still going to exist. So whatever I got in the first, second, and third marking period is also going to calculate with the cumulative average of whatever I got in the fourth. So if I do whatever I need to do and I got the effort and I got 100 in the fourth, you're putting that together in one full average. So it's not going to be in the end that everybody's the same at the end of the year, but it's certainly going to be something that's going to be motivating to kids. And if I'm a kid, I'm going to say, great, I can get on and I'm going to do my work and I can get 100. I'll go for that. I work hard for that. And that takes a lot of that pressure off, which right now, I don't necessarily think we need. What we need right now is for kids to realize that the learning is what matters. So that's the system we're going to go with for 7 through 12, and high school cabinet, middle school. We're in agreement with it. We went back and forth about what we think is the best model. Everybody said, yep, let's do it. And like I said, the most important thing out of this is going to be the feedback to kids. So when I'm working on whatever I'm working on, it's the feedback I'm getting from my teacher about what I'm learning about that matters, because really the grade's off the table. I ain't got to worry about it at that point. I really got to worry about is just, do I get this? Do I really understand it? And that's going to be kind of the model moving forward. So
I think we're in a, when you consider the difficult time that we're in, and the fact that there are no 3 through 8 ELA and math assessments or science assessments or Regents exams. You've probably heard over the past decade how if we didn't have these exams, we could do so much more. We could be focused on so much more about, more authentic learning opportunities. So while this is difficult across the board for everyone to make this transition, it really is an opportunity as well for us to move forward and kind of take advantage of being able to do things a little bit differently than we're always able to do, with an assessment hanging over our heads sometimes at the end of the year. So again, I just want to thank all our staff who put countless hours into this to come up with a framework. And again, it won't be perfect. We know that it's a fluid situation. Things are changing. But we felt we can't be at a every 2 weeks trying to make a decision what we're going to do. We really need to have a plan to be able to move forward as to if we're not going to walk back through the doors, because we just don't know that. So we wanted to put this together. Our plan is to, if you're comfortable with this, to communicate this out to staff in the morning. Again, a majority of staff have seen this. Several staff have seen this. And then we'll share that out to them to review again. And then the following day or two, get it out to our parents and our students to be able to look at. So we'll probably condense that a little bit just to make it a little bit more reader friendly for parents. And then we'll go with that. So does anybody have any questions?
the other thing too to point out is that, just like I said with the elementary, we are not going to overwhelm kids with a ton of busy work. It's no more than 2 assignments a week. And those assignments they're going to look a little different, right? It's going to be more about project-based ideas. The concept is, I'm going to make it up, imperialism and social studies. And that's the overarching theme you're trying to get after. And there's some sort of work that is going to be designed towards that topic. And a kid's going to have to show they get it. And it's going to be a lot of back and forth between the teacher and kids on those kind of assessments. So traditional assessments where I sit down and take an exam, they're not going to be there. It's not like that. And really, it's a great opportunity for us to try some new things and see that learning can happen away from what we traditionally have always known. So any questions on anything so far?
Bob, I guess, obviously, things have been the other way for so long, that they certainly make sense to me. I won't speak for the rest of the board the way they were. But also, given the circumstances now and what we're trying to deal with, this also makes sense. But are you suggesting that perhaps we stay with this when this virus is in the rearview mirror?
I'm not sure that will happen.
Well, I didn't.
What I do think,
to be clear,
it's going to open up. It's opening up some pretty big conversations around what we actually do in school. It is opening up some pretty big conversations around how we sort and select kids and whether or not we really think that's a good idea. I think those conversations are going to come to the forefront about our systems and the way we do that in education. And this isn't just a WeGo. This is across all the nation and how we do things because of where the situation we're in.
Right.
I do not necessarily see a wholesale change happening, this fall with this. Is it possible? Sure. Based on what happens with this, but probably not likely. It might be some modification that we use. So you'll see standards-based grading still tied to numbers like you traditionally understand as a 0-100 scale. But
I think we've been, one of the things to clarify too is obviously from pre-K all the way until 5th grade up until this year, it's standards-based grading. So that's what parents know. That's what kids know right from the get-go through all their early years in schooling. This year, actually, we transitioned standards-based grading into 6th grade as well, who used to give number grades. So that transition's gone pretty well. The 6th grade staff have done an outstanding job of making that transition successful. So it's something that we're definitely looking at in terms of a wholesale change. As Bob said, I don't think that that's probably something that would happen that quickly, but I think over time, there's some components there that we can work towards to down the road.
Well, again, I think considering the situation that this all makes sense to go in this direction. Whether or not we continue with it down the road, I agree with that. Things don't turn on a dime, at least not in New York State.
No.
So
True.
I guess we'll see.
Very
which
true.
is a good point because there was a lot of speculation that maybe New York State would use this opportunity with Regents exams because they're exploring them. They didn't. So they're sticking with them. It's still moving forward. You're just exempt. It sounds like they're all coming back next year with the same thing. But with those assessments, it makes things a little difficult to transition the way we're transitioning right now. The assessments do cause somewhat of a wrinkle in these kind of plans. Keep going, Marcy, to, let's see, support for students. So in addition to your general education teacher, you also have special education teachers who are going to be involved. So the way that's working is the classroom teacher or gen ed teacher is working directly with special education teachers, and there's going to be exchange of materials so that special education teachers can see what is being given to their students. In addition to that, there's also times that we're going to be available so that, if a kid that is scheduled to go into a resource room, that resource room teacher can be available to them as well. The other available resources is obviously our school counselors. They've been doing a lot of work organizing their team. They have gotten themselves all set up on Google Classroom, and they're doing a bunch of work and reaching out to kids. And behind the scenes, they're still making strong connections with kids. So counseling hasn't stopped, right? There are kids that might be struggling with this environment, and they are continuing to connect with kids and helping them through this. And like in the rest of the team, you have our academic leadership, our principals and assistant principals. It's all a team approach. Everyone is contributing, and I think every one of our roles are changing a little bit too through all of this. So everyone's adapting and doing the best they can with the new environment, and so far so good. The only last message that we want to get out to people is that we're here for them. And I think that that's important to understand, not only for our parents and our kids, but also our teachers and our employees, because you got to remember with teachers, they have families too. So as I've been talking with them and we've been talking with them, some of them have 3 little kids at home, plus they're also trying to teach. So they're trying to manage their environment at the same time as they're trying to manage their schooling. So there is, this is different. They're not sending kids off to daycare. So we have to be cognizant of that. And it's important for parents to be cognizant of that as well, and to be patient with us as we work through things. And there's going to be a lot of this connection and relationship work that's going to be required for us to get through this and do well with it. But I think what it's important is for people to understand is that we're there for them. And I think for students, for them to understand is that we're looking to make you successful in this. We are looking to get you through this and get you what you need to know to be successful in your coursework and in your grade level. And that's what matters most to us, is that you're connected to us and that we can help you along. And as we got there in the hashtag #08 together, we're going to try to practice that as much as we can in everything we do. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts.
Well, just a comment, Bob and Corey, I think you guys have done a tremendous job, you and your staff. I mean, I know this is a monumental task, and as Corey said earlier, it's unprecedented. And I just think that you've done a tremendous job to this point, and thank both of you and all your staff for the hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So you'll see later on, after I give a budget update under district business, we'll talk about our current grading policy and just a suspension of that grading policy based on how we're moving forward here at the end of the year for Q4. It's not a huge change, but enough of a change in some of the reporting pieces that it was important for us to kind of draw the line in the sand with that. And we'll talk about that under district business. But budget wise, just wanted to give you an update. We didn't know a ton the last meeting that we had because things were so up in the air. So we did get some feedback based on a budget and what's come out of the state and the governor's approach here is that he's frozen foundation aid back to what last year's foundation aid was. So that essentially means that we are about, I think, $175,000 in foundation aid, and some of our other aids revenues that that we would have had in this process have been reduced as well. So again, it was back to the drawing board to see where we're at. We had initially been building this budget with about 8 positions to attrition in the budget to get us whole in this process, and I'll talk further about where we're at as we go. So nothing's really changed in terms of the property tax levy. Our allowable maximum levy this year is 1.82%, and you can see that there. Our total state aid is increased by 1.74%. I believe last year we were 1.23, somewhere's in there. So it fluctuated a little bit based on, I think, some transportation aid. We got a little bit more transportation aid. We currently, at this moment, as you'll see on the first slide, do not have any reserves or fund balance built in, and I'll talk a little bit about that, further in the slides here. So if we look at again our projected revenue, you can see on a year-to-year basis we've reduced the appropriated fund balance to 1.6. It's not hard to look at this and to figure out we're on limited revenues now and moving forward, and we have been, I think, for quite a few years now. So we're looking at a total revenue reduction, year-to-year reduction in revenue of about $73,000. And again, the increase to the tax levy would be 1.82. Just slide that up, Mars. So state aid, when we looked at foundation aid, we talked initially about the governor was trying to lump in the instructional based aids into the foundation aid. He did not get that approved, but what he did get approved was that foundation aid is frozen. So essentially all of those things are untouched right now. The work that we do with BOCES and the aidable instructional pieces are not in that process. So some of these numbers changed based on where foundation aid was before and where it currently is now. So you can actually see we're at a little bit of a year-to-year reduction of about $9,500 total in the foundation aid piece. Again, our transportation's up a little bit, which gets us into here. Our building aid's up a tiny bit. So, as we move forward, again, we're looking at, very limited revenue in state aid. We're at about 399,400 here. So as we move up and look at our miscellaneous revenues, the big thing, which I think we talked about before, is we had interest earnings built in of about 78,000. We had to zero that out based on that the market is currently not doing well and interest rates are pretty close to zero. So we don't expect to see any revenue there. So we had to back that piece out of there. We also in the budget, there was an adjustment to the formula for students in residential placements, which we take on more costs for that now. So it was a fine print thing that got approved, and which would cost us an additional about $90,000 in that process. So we had to make that adjustment there as well on the revenue side. So if you want to scroll up a little bit here, Mars, big picture again, if you look at from last year to this year, last year we appropriated 671,000. So right from the get-go, we're in a structural deficit by using reserves. We currently are in about a $325,000 to $330,000 deficit right now of what we're looking at over this current year. I expect that to level out to probably become even by the time the school year ends. If things continue the way they have right now, we'll see some savings, but not a huge significant savings. Most of our costs are in staff and benefits, but we will see some savings in extra hours and things like that will come back. So we're really hoping that can level out that structural deficit piece, and that we could come ahead with a surplus in this budget year, which would get us to 3 years in a row of having a budget that's in surplus of revenues or expenditures, revenues to expenditures. So that would be a good thing, even though it's not a huge increase in that gap from expense to revenue. So if you want to scroll up, Mars, you can see here 2021, again, as I said, the fund balance is 1.7 to 1.6. The property tax levy equates to $319,312 for us. We've put in here currently, based on conversations with CBO, our central business office, that the use of reserves right now should be very, very limited, if any reserves being used, based on the current climate of budget in the state and what things could look like in the next few years. So we want to be cautious moving forward, knowing that probably over the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to take some time for this thing to level out, and we're probably going to see some pretty big hits in terms of revenues in the future. So you can see we did not implement at this point. We did not put any of those reserves in there. Foundation aid is a little bit lower, as I had mentioned. And to this point, currently, state aid is finalized. But what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is there's also a potential that this could be a year where we see mid-year aid cuts from the state. And that's happened in the past. It's not common, but it has happened in really bad fiscal times where school districts have seen some mid-year cuts from the state. Probably several of you remember the conversation around gap elimination adjustment back in 2010, 11, right in that range. Was essentially a 5-year rollout of funds that were taken back from school districts, a revenue that was taken back from school districts. And I think we need to be prepared for something along those lines. It might not be called gap elimination, but it might be called pandemic elimination. I'm not exactly sure what they're gonna to call it at this point.
Hey, Corey.
Yes.
on that adjustment in the actual state aid calculation this year, there is what's called a pandemic adjustment. That's
Yes.
what they titled it. And it was about a little over $400,000 for us. But what they did, New York State did, is they filled that pandemic adjustment number with federal stimulus money to compensate for it. So what you'll see in the actual state aid calculation is it says, it's about $410,000 of a pandemic adjustment, which is a negative to the state aid, but then is filled with federal aid coming in on the back end so that it nets it out at zero.
Right.
But it's an important point to make is that that number is there, and meaning that it's likely to show up in the future. And as far as the aid calculation.
The question becomes, will we actually see that money when things actually shake out at the state level? Will there be such greater needs in other budget areas across the state that we'll actually end up receiving those funds? We're not exactly sure in this process. There's so many unknowns. So again, considerations moving forward, the potential for a mid-year revenue adjustment. Right now, we expect little to no expense from a transportation perspective moving forward in terms of aid. We might see a little bit less coming back in revenue based on the fact that we're not transporting students right now. So we've got to be cognizant of that as well with some of our revenues, being adjusted as we go. So we're working with CBO daily to kind of analyze and track to where we think things may be going. So again, the recommendation from them, and I would agree, is that, we try to use the least amount of reserves possible, knowing that over the next few years is going to be really, really pretty tough with a $10 to $15 billion deficit at the state level. So I think we've got to buckle down and be prepared for some tough times. I can tell you, I sat in on a call with Congressman Reed, and that was with superintendents that are further west. So it would be out Corning, Horseheads out that way. And really, he talked a bit about the planning and process around a phase 4 in a stimulus package, which could be upwards of $5 trillion, including a large amount of infrastructure work and money for education as well. So while I think that there's some hope of those things occurring, I think that's really to try to stabilize things as best as possible. I still don't believe that we're going to be in a really good situation anytime soon in terms of revenues from the state of New York. So I just want us to be prepared for that as we move forward. So again, if you look at the last slide here, our current budget gap right now, so we've included all positions to attrition right now, have already been included in this process. Our gap still is about 505,000. So we're really looking moving forward. We have 3 options. We've got to reduce with some additional positions through layoffs or elimination of positions. We've got to look at the potential of some of our ERS reserve, possibly, or a combination of both. We've, over the last couple years, we've really scaled back a lot of the budget lines. I think you'll remember last year we had to, having reduced the budget from 3.83 to 2.83, we did have to cut out a lot of equipment and materials and supplies funds. So we're really at a minimum in those areas of where to go at this point. So this is our current gap, and we'll continue to work on this over the next few weeks. As you know, the budgets, the votes have been extended till at least June 1st. So it's backed our timeline up anywhere about from 2 to 3 weeks of all of our dates. So we're going to come out with a new budget timeline to do some online presentations and question and answer things for folks in the community as we move forward. But again, as I say, we're really in day-to-day, week-to-week information coming to us in waves of things that are happening across the state. So I think we've got to be prepared for what this is going to look like in the future for us. So
Corey, are you
Yeah.
still having your meetings with, I'm sure it's not as often as normal, but with the other superintendents?
yes.
They're all being faced with the same dilemmas, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm sure. Has there been any discussion? I mean, looking at our own district, obviously we want to save as many jobs as possible. We don't want to
Sure.
see what happened, you know, happen again from back years ago. Bob, you remember how many teachers we had to let go. We don't want to see that if we can avoid it. You know, but if we were to look at, you know, collectively summarizing the possibilities for attrition and sharing, you know, via technology, has there been any discussions like that?
Yeah, though, I mean, those are discussions, you know, that have actually been happening. You know, we've been talking about, you know, programmatically, at least, especially in Tioga County, on how we can start to share amongst just our school districts in that area in terms of programs. So we've talked a little bit about what that looks like programmatically for us, and obviously working with BOCES as well. Now that the clarity is there a little bit on that he's pulling out those instructional aids have been pulled out, that it's obviously still advantageous for us to work through BOCES with some of these programs in a shared model. So yeah, we'll continue to do that, to have those discussions. I think, you know, those are, you know, you probably, Gene, recall the gap elimination, I think, was upwards of a $2 million hit to the Wego-Appalachian School District back in 2010-11. So
yeah,
that's a pretty unprecedented, pretty big hit financially.
it was devastating, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we're hoping that you know, we can weather the storm a little bit here and do some things differently. But again, we still have, you know, about $500,000 that we've got to come up with a plan for here as we move forward. Any other questions about budget? Like I said, we'll put together a new framework for now. Things kind of have gotten real messy with the pandemic, and you know, we had chat roles scheduled, we had community forums scheduled, so we're going to try to find a different approach, probably via Zoom or something along those lines, where we can engage with people, thought exchange, where we can ask questions and get feedback. We'll probably put something out here you know, shortly, but you know, as you see this and you look at the big picture, we're really just operating on limited, less and less revenue every year. Seems to be to part of the formula that comes with in the state. So you know, we'll continue to dig in and do the best we can and bring you all the scenarios of decisions to be made. Okay, any questions? Anybody have anything before before we move on to district business? I do want to just before we get to district business, I want to thank again and highlight our music department on some positive news. I know there's been a lot of negative in the news recently, and it's always nice to have some positive to focus on. And third year in a row, they've been recognized as one of the best communities for music by NAM. So we're pretty excited about that. It's a great accomplishment for our music department, for our students, and for our community. So I wanted to highlight them for that. Again, I can't thank our food service folks enough. They're in every day, and you know, it's hundreds of meals. We've been working with the anti-hunger group in Tioga County. We've been storing food in our maintenance building. They actually did a pickup last week for families throughout the entire county. I think it was upwards of almost 400 large boxes of food that were picked up in that process. So the amount of food that's being moved is pretty incredible, and there's a lot of people that are involved, and you know, I just can't thank them enough for that. You know, our transportation folks are taking individual food meals to homes who can't get out of their homes to come and pick the meals up. So you know, they're doing upwards of 30 to 40 to 50 deliveries a day to get out to our families. So the other piece too, I think that, you know, I don't want to lose sight on all this, as important as, you know, our students have been pretty resilient, and they've really tackled this thing with just you know, tremendous effort and grit as they've had to, you know, kind of go through this challenge. So our seniors are going through a lot. You know, it's a tough time for them. There's a lot of things that they have planned that are special for them, and we're going to try to do our best to recognize them, as we move forward. So again, so I'll skip down to district business just quickly. And again, this is our current, this was asking you really to suspend the current grading policy. Our policy is fairly vague. Most of the regulations, piece of it come out of the building when it comes to grading, primarily more around our secondary level. As I said before, there's a piece in there with reporting when it comes to pre-K through 6. And one of the things we decided to do in conversation with staff was to suspend quarter 3 and quarter 4 report cards for parents and for students at the pre-K through 6 level, because really this is going to be a fluid situation and there's going to be a lot of feedback in this process. So we just felt that was the best process at this time to, bring them up to speed of, they'll be in constant communication with how kids are doing and where they're at. So that's the biggest component of suspension. And then obviously, so what I'll bring to you will be probably a paragraph or so of what you've heard tonight, primarily adjustment around our 7 through 12 going to standards-based grading. So if there's any questions about that, I'll get you a sample of that throughout the week. Hope that next week on the 20th, we can just approve that, and then we'll be able to move forward. So you can see this policy. Does anybody have any questions about this policy? It just allows us in these, in this emergency situation to make adjustments to meet the needs of our students.
No?
Nope. All set with that. So we're just.
So we need a motion on this, right, Corey?
Yeah, we do. We need an approval for this. Yes.
Okay. Can I have a motion to accept this policy?
So moved.
Linda?
Second.
Is that Stacy? Okay. Hopefully I got it right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That's carried then.
Great. So just so you're aware, we will share out this, the plan with the rest of staff tomorrow morning, or probably even tonight. I'll send it out. And we'll get it in the hands of parents so they can know what to expect, and we can point them to our website and our hotline for questions, or obviously reaching out to building principal or their teachers for more clarification as well. So just so you're aware of that communication plan. And that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, Corey, thanks. What about we have the BOCES services, the request for services?
Yes.
Corey?
Sorry. Yeah.
I need a motion on that as well, right?
Correct.
Can I have a motion to accept this is the final request, right, Corey?
Yes, it is. Final request for services. We were hopeful that maybe this was going to get delayed, but it did not. So we had to.
They need it to build their budget too. So,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
so I need a motion.
So moved.
Danny,
Okay.
Jason, any questions on the request for services from BOCES? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's carried. So I'm guessing the principals aren't on the call, so there's no committee reports, Corey?
No, they're not.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And Shauna, do we have any questions or comments on the messaging for the Zoom for the board meeting?
No, there are no public comments.
Okay, well then, hearing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Kathy?
Second.
Stacy? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I guess we're done.
Thanks,
Great
everybody.
job again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, everyone.
I'm daughter.